So let's talk about the brand new Microsoft Surface Duo smartphone because recently everyone got to review this product and I've been reading reviews on this product. I've also been watching YouTube videos on this product, and from what I'm gathering around the internet, it looks like a mixed bag for this thing. And for the most part, I'm hearing people actually say that this thing is something you should probably steer clear of and not actually buy. It's not necessarily a really bad device, but it's also not really an amazing device, especially when you consider the price of this thing. And the price of this thing is somewhere around 1,400 US dollars, and that's really expensive. It's not even the most expensive smartphone. I think that crown would definitely go to Samsung's Galaxy Z Fold 2. That one is $2,000, but you can see it's one of the most expensive smartphones on the market, regardless. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Microsoft's Surface Duo product, Microsoft Surface Duo is more on the lines of a foldable smartphone. Granted, it's not exactly the same as something like Samsung's Galaxy Fold 2. It's more on the lines of a device that has two screens with a hinge down the middle. Kind of think of this device as like a 3DS or a DS from Nintendo if you ever use those products. But granted, that is kind of a disservice to this product just due to the fact that this product is actually built way better and has way better screens than a traditional 3DS or DS from Nintendo. But it is on that same concept, and that's pretty much what we have here. And yeah, I pretty much agree with what I've been reading on the internet about this device. A lot of people are saying it's not worth your money, and I definitely have to agree. Granted, I do have to give Microsoft some slack here, just because if you look at this product is a Generation 1 product, and of course, anytime there is a new idea, usually new ideas always lead to some kind of problem, and of course, in this scenario, there is enough problems with this device that it's hard to recommend something like this, especially when it's so expensive at 1,400 US dollars. You're honestly better off buying something like a traditional flagship smartphone like an iPhone or a Galaxy smartphone, because you will get more for your money, and overall you will get a better smartphone at that. But not to say that this thing is still a really cool concept phone. It's still a really cool idea that Microsoft actually threw out. And honestly, I personally like the idea of this dual screen smartphone with a hinge down the middle, because I think it opens up a whole bunch of possibilities, especially if you're a person that likes to do things like multitask. That's where this thing was really meant to shine. It was really supposed to be a device that would allow you to use two apps at the same time, and at that point, that's where this thing, I feel like, really does excel. I feel like it really does excel when you have two apps open at the same time, and that's pretty much what this thing was, or what this thing was trying to go for, and what type of person it was trying to actually target. It was trying to target the person that was going to be a workhorse on the go, or if you needed to get some productivity done on the go. That's what this device is really made for. But it's just really unfortunate that there are a lot of downsides to this device. One of the biggest downsides to this device, besides obviously again that high price point, definitely has to go to the software. It's kind of unfortunate from what I'm hearing around the internet. The software experience with this device is just not great, and I heard a lot of times the software is very buggy, it's very glitchy, it's almost, I wouldn't say unusable, but I wouldn't say it's definitely worth $1,400 when you're getting an experience like that. And that's something you don't want with a phone, especially when you have to rely on it. It's just not a really great feeling. But when it does work, apparently it does work well. Another thing besides the software, which is of course the biggest reason why you wouldn't buy this thing, because software is at the heart of an actual smartphone, of course, or any piece of hardware. Software is more important than hardware, and that's the problem here. But besides the hardware, or excuse me, the software not being really good, there are a couple more problems. Like for instance, they are using last gen technology, so they are using chipsets from 2019, and that's of course not good. But I understand why Microsoft actually used last generation chipsets, due to the fact that they've already had this in production for about a year now. And since they've had this in production for about a year, they really had no choice because that was the chipset at the time. But a lot of people said that older chipset inside of this is really bogging down the experience, and the software is not good. So you take a combination of last generation hardware versus software not being all too stable and all too great, means that you are going to have a bad time. Granted, what Microsoft obviously could do is they could go in there and actually fix the software, of course, with updates down the road. But the thing is, though, you buy a product how it is when you buy it. You don't look at the future of a product because nothing is really guaranteed. I've seen time and time again in the tech industry where companies claim they're going to fix a product, but then they just never get around to fixing it, or they really don't know how to fix it, and it's kind of a shame. So you look at this product as it is today, and as it stands, this thing is just not that great of a product, taking in consideration that it is just way too expensive for this thing, and the top all that software and hardware that it has going for it, that's not so great. The camera on this thing is not great at all. That's pretty much what I've been hearing, and what I've seen of this product. I agree, it's just not great because you are forced to use the front facing camera, and usually front facing cameras to begin with aren't better than their other smartphone camera counterparts, the one that are on the back of the actual smartphone. But this smartphone doesn't actually have a camera on the back of the smartphone. It only has one camera, so you're forced to use that for selfies, and you're forced to use that as your main camera to take normal pictures, and that's something I don't really like about this. And this smartphone, of course, is definitely not targeting people who like to take pictures or use cameras, because if you like to do that, this camera is pretty much not even good for that, and you're pretty much wasting your money on that. To summarize this thing up, I think it's a cool concept from Microsoft. I think the idea was there in principle. I like the idea of two screens with a hinge down the middle. I think there is a number of different use cases for this, to have two apps open at the same time. I really do like this. I personally would use something like this if it was much more cheaper and it didn't have all these flaws. It's, again, a Generation 1 product. I would assume if Microsoft decides to make like a Microsoft Surface Duo 2, I would assume they would fix all the problems this thing has going for it. But either way, it's a pretty unique idea in the tech industry, and I said this so many times. I'm a person that likes it when new companies, or just companies in general, like to try new ideas in the tech space, because sometimes old ideas are old ideas. Not to say that don't fix what's not broken, and that's usually the case here. If it's not broken, don't fix it, and you don't really need to make a new idea. But sometimes new ideas could be beneficial to our life and could change our life for the better. But in this case, there are just too many problems with the Microsoft Surface Duo, and at that price point, it's something you really can't consider with all the downsides to this device, especially when you compare this to other flagships on the market. You're honestly better off buying a traditional flagship smartphone from like Apple, Samsung, Google. You will get a better experience overall. You'll get better cameras, you'll get better performance, you'll get much more stable software. Overall, your experience is just going to be way more better. And when we use smartphones day in and day out, you really need something that's going to be fast. You really need something that's going to be reliable. You need something that's going to have just overall good things about it, and that's where the Microsoft Surface Duo does fail. And it's unfortunate they shipped this like this. Again, later down the road, they can always update this thing to make the software much more stable and give you a better experience. But even so, there's just too many downsides for what you're paying with this product. It's just really a hard sell for most people, and I would honestly say it's like most reviewers out there on the internet to date. I would probably say stay away from this at $1,400. If it was cheaper, I might say, yeah, even with the flaws of this thing, it might be worth it, but I can't justify $1,400, especially when this thing is just not really a great device for what it is, just keeping it real. We'll have to wait and see if Microsoft decides to do a Microsoft Surface Duo 2 or continues to build on something like the Microsoft Duo that we currently have right now, only by updating it to make the experience a little bit better. Now, the next one on my list is actually about Microsoft, because it looks like Microsoft is giving us more information on their upcoming Series S and Series X consoles. And it looks like, from what I'm hearing on the internet, which is not really confirmed by Microsoft actually, to be honest, but it's more so confirmed by other people on the internet. But apparently, from what I'm hearing, the Microsoft consoles coming out are going to be consoles that unfortunately Microsoft has to take a hit on, and that's just not great news, because that does mean that they have to make their money up somewhere if they're willing to take a loss on their consoles. And honestly, I'm not really too surprised that Microsoft would actually be taking a loss on their next generation consoles, because if you look at what's under the hood with the Series S and the Series X, it's not like this generation with the Xbox One and the Xbox One X, where they came out underpowered, at least even if you compare them to PC standards and things like that, where it really wasn't that big a deal. But now, since they're using so much power under the hood with all this technology, of course, it's unfortunate that they have to take a loss, but I guess they're willing to take a loss. But in the end, ultimately, it is going to hurt the consumer, just because apparently also there is speculations and rumors floating around the internet that say that the proprietary SSDs that are going to be made for the Xbox Series S and Series X are going to be extremely expensive. I'm talking upwards of like $250 for these things, and you are going to need these things to actually put your games on. Microsoft did confirm you can use an actual external hard drive, which is 3.0 capable if you have one, or you can use an external SSD if you have one. But the thing is, though, those are only going to be for things like older games, specifically like, for instance, Xbox One games or Xbox 360 games, just pretty much backwards compatibility. You can play games on there. I did also hear apparently you can put Xbox Series games on an external hard drive or an external SSD if you have one. But the thing is, though, you can't play them from it. You do have to swap it to your main SSD that your console actually has, which makes sense since 3.0 hard drives aren't really that fast. They're faster than 2.0, of course, but they're not up to today's standards, and especially when these games claim they're going to have almost no loading times, you need something that's going to be able to boot extremely fast. And of course, 3.0 is just not going to cut it when it comes to speeds, obviously. So yeah, that's just not great news. Honestly, I'm not really too shocked that these things are going to be very expensive for these custom SSDs that are going to work with them, and you're going to pretty much be forced to buy these custom SSDs for your next gen system, especially since you don't have a lot of space on your device. The Series S, the cheaper one for $299, is only going to ship with a 512 SSD out of the box, and of course that's only like 2 or 3 games nowadays, when games are just so big, especially when you take in consideration the higher textures, the higher resolutions, the higher frame rates. Overall, it means that the file sizes for these games are going to be really, really big. And I do know also, in general, SSDs, at least if you compare them to their hard drive counterpart, of course, SSDs are just much more expensive. I mean, granted, they have came down in price ever since they first were announced, and they are becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But two things you have to realize: Microsoft is probably going to sell you a very high capacity for these custom SSDs. And then another thing that's making these probably very expensive is the fact that these things are custom SSDs. They're not just standard over-the-shelf SSDs that you can buy from any manufacturer. They are going to be specific to the Microsoft Xbox, and they're probably working with some company behind the scenes to make the fastest SSDs possible out there for this machine, and that's probably what's driving up the price. It's kind of a shame that these things apparently are going to be very expensive. I'm talking over $200 for these things, because a lot of people are going to look at the price of these custom SSDs for their system and be like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to pay for these custom SSDs, and these SSDs are just so expensive. It's almost like the price of the system. We're talking 220, 250, whatever the case may be, either way. And then you look at the system, even the base system, which is $299. It's kind of like, yeah, I don't know about that. But I do know, again, we were talking about how Microsoft is in a situation where they're taking a loss on every console, and if they're definitely taking a loss on every console, they got to make their money back somewhere, and the only way to really make their money back if the consoles aren't really making them enough money is going to be the accessories, like the games, the hardware, like controllers, custom SSDs, Game Pass subscriptions, and things like that. That's really where it's going to balance itself out, and at the end of the day, by Microsoft taking a loss on the consoles, they're hoping everything else makes them a profit at the end of the day. And I get why they did that. They just have to do that. But unfortunately, it's kind of unfortunate that these SSDs are going to be so expensive, and it's also unfortunate that you're pretty much going to be forced to buy these things, since for some reason Microsoft decided to only put 512 gigabyte in the Series S, which of course again isn't many games, and you're pretty much going to have to buy a custom SSD, which is unfortunate. But I kind of also feel like Microsoft really wanted to keep the price down, so they had to give you a small SSD to begin with the base system especially, and due to the fact that if they're taking a loss anyway, they had to give you a lower storage, so they can try to give everyone an incentive to actually go out and buy something like a custom SSD to put in your system, which is actually still kind of unfortunate, because these things are just going to be very expensive apparently. Keep in mind, again, these are only rumors and speculations at the very moment, so who knows how true or how real this is. But for me, I think this is probably going to be real, and I don't see why not, because like I said, SSDs are expensive to begin with, and top it all off, we do have custom SSDs that they're not just generic over-the-shelf SSDs you would get from any other company. Now, speaking of Microsoft again, it looks like Microsoft is going to be raising the price of Games Pass on PC, and apparently Games Pass on PC used to cost $4.99 per month. I never really checked in to Games Pass on PC, so I don't really know if it was $4.99, but apparently it used to be $4.99, or it's still currently $4.99, and of course, at $4.99, it's like a no-brainer. If you have a gaming PC, you might as well buy Games Pass. You're pretty much saving yourself so much money, especially if you were to just buy one game for $60 a year. It's still cheaper to buy Games Pass on PC for $4.99. But that's all about to change, it looks like, in the near future. On September 17th, it looks like Microsoft is going to be raising the price of Games Pass on the PC from $4.99 to $10.99, and $10.99 is still a very fair deal. That's the same price as people would pay on the Xbox if you had Games Pass on Xbox. $4.99 wouldn't barely be making them any money. I think for most people, or yeah, pretty much everyone, $10 is not too crazy for what you're getting. You're pretty much getting unlimited games each month, and that's still cheaper than buying one game for $60, and you have a lot of games to play. So I'm not really too mad about it. Of course, there'll be people that are mad about it, because anytime something has to be raised when it comes to price, of course, that's not good news for everyone's wallet. And I agree on that. But just the fact that they're not trying to gouge this thing, or not trying to make it way too expensive for most people, I think most people will be okay with $10. Again, that's the same price you would pay on Xbox anyway. So it's kind of like they're just trying to balance it out between PC and Xbox to really make sure that everyone has the same type of payment and the same type of experience there, and they want to balance it out. And I agree with Microsoft. $4.99 is just too expensive. Oh, and apparently from this article, it looks like that was a limited time price, apparently. So apparently it was never actually, I guess, $4.99 to begin with. According to this article that I am reading, it says, Xbox website has long stated that $4.99 is a limited time price, apparently. So apparently it wasn't even a price that was going to stick around to begin with. So $10 it is, but yeah, they just wanted to warn everybody that the price is going up, so be a lookout on that. But I think for most people, you're probably not going to discontinue your service if you were thinking they were going to charge you $5 more. If they raised it $10 more, I would say then it's much more of a hard sell at like $15 to $20. That's where you really start having to think about it. But for $10, and if you especially play games all the time, it's pretty much a no-brainer at this point, because Games Pass is amazing. You get a lot of different games on like last generation hardware, the 360. You also get every first party title. Granted, Microsoft has never really been the king of first party titles, at least if you compare them to other systems today like Sony or Nintendo. They kind of lack in that department, but either way, just getting first party titles day one is always nice, and you just have so many games at your disposal for $10. It's a no-brainer. Now, the next one on my list is actually about an upcoming game. The upcoming game is not really a brand new game. It's more of a comeback. And the game I'm talking about is Scott Pilgrim Saves the World. And Scott Pilgrim Saves the World was a game that was originally made for last generation hardware. I'm talking about the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii generation. And that's pretty much what that game was developed for. And if you don't know about that game was a really kick-ass game. It was pretty much a beat-em-up, if you ever played beat-em-up games and things like that. And apparently it was an amazing game for what it is. But for some reason, last decade, I think in 2014 or 2015, the company behind this game actually pulled the plug. I think Ubisoft, I want to say, owned the rights to this game or something, and something happened to the licensing agreement or something, and the game had to be pulled off of all storefronts. And a lot of people were upset because it wasn't just a random game being pulled, but it was a game that was a good game being pulled. And I can see why so many people out there were so mad about how this game got removed from all the storefronts. And I wanted to talk about this just due to the fact that I'm glad this game is coming back. They did confirm that this game is coming to all platforms. I think later this year, I do believe. It says holiday 2020, so we don't have a concrete release date for this game. They did state that all the DLC for this game is going to be in contact when you buy this game. They did also announce that this game is going to be a game that's going to have... They did announce that this game is going to be a game that is only going to be a digital game only, so you can't just walk into a store and actually buy this game if you wanted to secure a copy of this game for the long haul. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. And I wanted to talk about this situation because even though I really do like digital distribution when it comes to video games, I think in a lot of cases it's just more convenient to have all your games on one system no matter what. Means that you never have to change discs, you don't have to worry about discs breaking, you don't have to try to find them, you don't have to switch them when you're sitting around. It's just more convenient. But every time I see the Scott Pilgrim situation, the future of digital distribution really does scare me. And I know it's not just Scott Pilgrim versus the world. I know other video games have had this problem too. There's probably many, many more that gotten taken down due to license agreements, due to copyright infringement, or whatever the case may be. And digital distribution scares me because what if you're on a system that only has digital distribution and for whatever case your game gets taken down, that storefront, that means you lose your purchase. And nobody should be entitled to lose their purchase because they paid their own money for the game. Granted, apparently from what I know is you don't actually buy the game when you pay your own money for a digital game. You're pretty much, as far as I know, renting the game out. You don't actually own the license. You kind of own the license to play it, but you're not really guaranteed to keep it. I know it's kind of confusing and things like that, but apparently you just don't have technically the real rights, whereas if you were to buy a game physical, you're kind of buying the rights to keep the game forever. Granted, I'm sure you can put in a disc from like an old system and it just not play because you need some kind of patch for it or some kind of DMR protection that made it just not work. So I'm assuming in any way that there's no guarantee that you would be able to keep a game forever, even if you bought, let's say, like a physical copy of a game, but the chances of you having to worry about a physical game versus a digital game is much more lower. And in most cases, physical games beat digital games in terms of how long you can play the game and keep the game practically forever. And this is something that I really do feel like the game industry has to figure out. They really have to figure out how they're going to allow people to get these digital games, but make sure these people who pay their hard-earned money for these games keep these games forever. Now, I know a lot of people are going to just say, well, it doesn't really matter that you can't keep these games in some situations forever because, one, most likely you're going to move on to another system, which is true for most people. Most people eventually move on to that next gaming hardware, especially if you're a hardcore gamer. You're not going to be using that one, like, let's say 360 for the rest of your life. You're going to get the next latest and greatest hardware from that manufacturer. So it's like you won't even be able to play some of your old games because, one, your system will break eventually, and you can't really transfer over your games to another system if your system is broken. And a lot of times, also, your games can't transfer over to the new hardware, so it's kind of like you just forget about your old hardware. But either way you look at it, I think it's still not fair to the consumer who's paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for video games in their lifetime to just lose an old purchase, because there is times that people want to go back to that old hardware to play that one game they can't get on current gen hardware or current gen platforms. They want to go back in time and experience it since the company either A, didn't port it over or didn't remaster that game, and you just cannot play anywhere else. So you want to go back to old hardware, but then the game's just not there or your hardware breaks. And that's something I'm also scared about too. Not just the fact that these games can be pulled off of these storefronts, but I'm also really scared about a lot of times these platforms either get discontinued. Like, for instance, I've seen it with Nintendo. Nintendo always discontinues their online storefronts. They did it with the Wii, and of course they're going to do it with the Wii U and 3DS eventually. The time's coming. It only makes sense when everyone moves on. It's not really that much profitable anymore to hold these storefronts. So it's kind of like, yeah, why have these storefronts even around when no one's really using them? So discontinuing them. But by discontinuing them, that does mean that if you ever want an old purchase back, you just cannot get it because you can't access your history of games that you previously bought. And so there is a lot of things to be worried about when it comes to digital distribution. Not just the fact that these games can be pulled off of storefronts, but just the fact that storefronts can close, your game system can get corrupted, your game system can break, and at the end of the day, nothing is really guaranteed, especially with digital distribution. And there has to be something that companies can do to guarantee that your digital purchases can be kept for a lifetime because you paid your hard-earned money for these games. And in a lot of cases, you spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for video games. And I think when you pay your hard-earned money for a product, you deserve to keep it for a lifetime. It's not fair that digital games you can't keep forever in some scenarios, but other products you can keep for a lifetime. What makes digital games different from like physical goods? Physical goods you get to keep forever, so why can't you keep something that's digital forever? It just doesn't make sense. And you would think you would get to keep something digital forever just due to the fact that it's stored in the cloud and it's on a storefront, it's on your hard drive, but nothing, again, is really guaranteed. And that's something I'm just not happy about because, let's face it, the real sad truth is we're moving into this future that's pretty much going to head towards a all digital distribution future, whether you like it or not. And we're moving into these cloud type of gaming situations, and we have the right to keep the purchases that we have bought. And I'm honestly not happy, but at least I am happy for Scott Pilgrim Saves the World. And I think everyone should try to buy this as soon as possible because who knows if this game is going to be removed from those stores. This may just be a limited time thing, and then they just may remove it because they may get in trouble, or they may just do it because it's just a limited time thing. So if you want Scott Pilgrim versus the World, I'd highly recommend picking this game up because apparently this game is a good game. Granted, I haven't really played this game for myself. I've only heard good things about this game, and looking at videos and pictures and things about this game, it looks like an amazing game, especially if you're a beat 'em up fan. Now, the next one on my list is actually about Walmart because it looks like Walmart begins testing drone deliveries for household goods and groceries. I do know this is not the first time in a company's history where a company has tried to do drone services. I think Amazon actually tried to do drone services before, but I don't think it worked out. I never really kept up on this whole drone situation, especially from Amazon, but it looks like Walmart is testing this out. I don't think there'll ever be a situation, if you ask me, where these drones are going to be the main way people get things delivered. I will say it's much more faster than like driving around with like a truck to everyone's house, obviously, because you have to worry about traffic, you have to worry about all these different things that slow down your service. But I guess it would be the same thing with drone technology. If drone technology ever picked up, we would be seeing a lot more drones in the sky. So either way, it really wouldn't be as fast. It may be faster, but there would still be some things that would slow it down to begin with. Ultimately, I don't know if something like this is actually going to take off, because I feel like there's just too many downsides to something like drone delivery, of course. And I think a lot of people question the reliability of drones. They also question the privacy of drones. They also question just a number of things about drones, and drones are actually quite scary. They are more practical than trucks and cars driving to your house to deliver you a package, but there's just too many things that are downsides to this. It just doesn't make sense. Like, for instance, what happens if your drone like dies in the middle of the sky, or better yet, someone destroys it, because there's always weirdos that destroy it? Or what if your package falls off the drone and things like that? Overall, it's just too many things. People are probably concerned about their packages being destroyed or damaged, worrying about what if the drones flying around land somewhere wrong. They're just basically too many things at stake here, which I personally still think that drone services can't really be the future of technology, and especially when we don't know what these things flying around could actually do and where they would land and things like that. Honestly, it's just too risky, and I don't think, honestly, we would ever see this become a main staple. But what am I to say is going to be the future of technology, just due to the fact the future of technology is very up in the air. You never know what companies are willing to do, what companies are willing to develop. I would say if everything got flushed out with something like this and more people could trust drones, they were much more reliable, you wouldn't have that worry about the drones and things like that. I would say that this is actually better off than cars and trucks. There is one downside to this regardless. It is the fact that drones can't carry some stuff that's actually really big. Of course, you would need something like a car or a truck to actually transport goods. And it looks like, of course, according to this article, not everything is going to be shippable through drone service. Of course, if it's too big, they'll still have to use alternative methods of transportation to deliver you goods. Again, this is only a test. They're only testing this out for certain areas. It looks like they're doing this pilot program in North Carolina, and honestly, I still don't think this is gonna really go through. And if it does go through, it's probably only going to be a limited areas, and only certain services are going to be allowed to actually use something like this, because again, it's just too risky. And I think too many people have too many concerns about drones and drone technology at the very moment. I don't think you'll be seeing drones fly around, because it would be kind of scary actually to just see random drones flying around to deliver you packages. It's just something that I think a lot of people actually fear in the long run. And yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.